Good morning, brothers and sisters in Christ, the lowly servant here. Welcome to my channel. This is an excerpt from the Book of Saints of the Roman Calendar by Enzo Lodi about Saint Teresa of Avila. Her feast day is on October 15. Have a listen, but first, Saint Teresa of Jesus died at Alba de Tormes in the province of Salamanca, Spain, on the historic night in which the Gregorian calendar replaced the Julian calendar. As a result, though she was born on October 4, her feast is celebrated on October 15. She was canonized in 1622 and named a Doctor of the Church in 1970 by Pope Paul VI. Teresa was born at Avila, Spain in 1515 with the family name of Teresa de Cepeda y de Alhumada and was of Jewish descent on her father's side. It was the golden age of Spain because of the vast amount of that precious metal that poured into Spain from Latin America, and also because of the large number of excellent spiritual treatises published during that period. As a child, she was very devout and even wished for martyrdom at the hands of the Moors. But during adolescence, her fervor cooled somewhat, and she was for a time a typical vain and sentimental girl. At the age of 20, however, she was greatly moved by reading the letters of Saint Jerome, and she decided to become a nun at the Carmelite Monastery of the Incarnation at Avila. Shortly after her entrance, she became seriously ill and had to be sent away for treatment. She returned to the monastery after her cure, but she was practically an invalid for several years. After reading the Confession of Saint Augustine and being deeply impressed by an image of the Isi Homo at the age of 40, resolved to dedicate herself seriously to the practice of prayer. She then began to work for the reform of Carmel, and she obtained permission to found the convent of Saint Joseph in Avila. With the help of Saint John of the Cross, the reform was extended also to the friars. Eventually, the Holy See recognized two distinct branches of the Carmelite order, the Descalced and the Calced. Writing from her own personal experience, Saint Teresa composed three major works on prayer and the mystical life: the life, the way of perfection, the interior castle. During her lifetime, she made more than 40 new foundations of Carmelite nuns of the strict observance. The prayers of the Mass touch on some of the high points of the life of Saint Teresa of Jesus. In the opening prayer, we read, "Father, by your Spirit, you raised up Saint Teresa of Avila to show your Church the way to perfection. May her inspired teaching awaken in us a longing for true holiness." Saint Teresa carried out her mission at a time when Spain was entering upon a period of extensive colonialism. A new age was dawning, not only for Spain but for the Carmelite nuns. Rightly did Pope Paul VI acknowledge her authoritative teaching on prayer and its influence on the Carmelite order, the praying church, and the world at large. In marking the fourth centenary of the death of Saint Teresa, Pope John Paul II said it was a powerful summons to the supreme values to which Saint Teresa had dedicated her life. The prayer over the gifts asks that God accept the gifts we bring in your practice as you were pleased with Saint Teresa's offering of her life in your service. This valiant woman, who was as courageous and fearless as any man, was in bad health most of her life. In addition, she suffered intense spiritual trials, leading to the transverberation of her heart by an angel with a flaming lance. Finally, in the prayer after communion, we are invited to pray that God will help us to follow Saint Teresa's example. Help us to follow Saint Teresa's example and sing your merciful love forever. Meditation on the sacred humanity of Christ is an essential element in the teaching of Saint Teresa, as we see in the Office of Readings, where she writes, God desires that these graces must come to us from the hands of Christ through his most sacred humanity, in which God takes delight. A person should desire no other path, even if he is at the summit of contemplation. The entrance antiphon and the communion antiphon are a canticle of love. My soul longs for you, my God. Forever I will sing the goodness of the Lord. Saint Teresa's message to us, first of all, that he who possesses God lacks nothing. God alone suffices. Secondly, not only is it possible for an individual to attain heights of mystical contemplation, but our prayer should also have an ecclesial dimension. We too can experience the truth of St. Paul's statement. We do not know how to pray as we ought, but the Spirit himself makes intercession for us. The mystical life is offered to all, as St. Teresa teaches, but it must not be confused with the phenomena that sometimes accompany the mystical experience, or with the pseudo-mystical or pantheistic experiences of the religions of the East. Its source is love, and its expression is a manifestation of love. Father, all-powerful and ever-living God, we do well always and everywhere to give you thanks as we honor Saint Teresa, on whom you bestowed such gifts of nature and grace. You espoused her to Christ, her divine friend, who taught her to be zealous in prayer and penance for the unity and the holiness of the Church. You endowed her with the wisdom of the saints to be our guide on the way of perfection, and the spiritual mother of a new family in Carmel.